All right, Andrew, let's bring in our panel on this. Richard Brodsky, former New York Assemblyman, senior fellow at Demos, professor at NYU. To his left, Dominic Carr, you all know him, political journalist and author. Nan Hayworth, former Republican congresswoman from New York, and Anthony Figliola, a political consultant and vice president at Empire Government Strategies. All right, does anybody at the table think we're going to have an 11th hour deal here, or does the sequester kick in come Friday?
I certainly, as someone who was there in the room, so to speak, when the sequester was,
right?
yeah, still having flashbacks, yes. The sequester idea came from the president, and the president certainly has, I give him a lot of credit for winning the messaging battle. And we know the American public wants to see the federal government. They know it's out of control. They want to see it come to the right size. There's public will to have an effective approach to these cuts.
I will ask my question. Do you think it happens on Friday, or do you think we have an 11th hour deal like we've seen so many times?
Richard, I think if it happens on Friday, there will be, nothing's written in stone. There will be active effort to
so if it happens, it's going to be for a little bit.
Provide an alternative, exactly.
I see no reason, Richard, why even as I think pointless as a few days of optics of having a sequester will be, I don't see why there's any reason, and we'll get into what the 27th holds in March, why people think this is going to go away in a couple of days.
It's not.
It's going to happen, and I think this thing goes to the end of the month.
As long as there is a political impasse over how you solve the larger question, the smaller question about $85 billion, which is all it is, it doesn't go anywhere. The issue for spending is long-term spending on entitlements. It is not the spending on the programs that are being cut, except for defense. Until there's a willingness to address a balanced approach on the long-term issues, this is a sideshow. And one of the reasons the American people are so angry about it is they sort of understand that. Wait a minute, we're arguing about $85 million of stupid cuts when the real problem is out-year revenues and out-year spending on entitlements. There's a disconnect here in the political process that will eventually show up. The president's going to win the politics because he's better at it than them. Boehner did not help himself by...
well, we'll talk about Boehner in a second. But, Dom, if you agree with Richard that this...
And I do.
Right, and this thing's not going to go away. This thing's going to be a fight. I think they got the government shut down on the March 27th is the next real day, at least in my eyes. I guess the question is, and maybe it's a district-by-district question, but who's going to have to blink first? Is it going to be that the headlines in the local dailies are going to say 300 people, the picture of them walking out of the company or the factory because the jobs are taken away? Or is it, hey, the sky didn't fall, this isn't as bad as they said it was, and then the president's going to have to say, all right,
I don't believe it's going to be the president. I believe it's going to be the Republicans looking at polling numbers. I think that Speaker Boehner, if he could be a real leader, meaning that if his own party would let him be a real leader, we wouldn't be in this situation. But his hands are tied. If he does anything that the Tea Party folks don't want, he's done as Speaker.
Well, we heard that from a Republican senator there, if you want to take Senator Johnson. But, Andrew, timeline and who's going to end up having to blink?
Well, I think at the very least you're looking at beyond the sequestration deadline. I think you're not going to see anything beforehand. It may be in the hours or days afterwards, like we saw with the fiscal cliff and like we've seen with other negotiations. You're right, it may get pushed all the way back to the 27th. It may get punted back to the 27th. They may just suspend the sequestration until then. I don't know hey, it's not as bad as we said it was going to be. Is that effective a counter argument? It's either going to be bad or it's not going to be bad, and I think people will base their opinions on that.
Whether it's bad or it's not bad, it doesn't solve the problem that even the Republicans say they want to solve. You can do the sequester or not do the sequester. The long-term question of entitlement spending and revenues is not in the debate. But that's why it's so nice.
It needs presidential leadership. We
Nan,
haven't had that.
I tell you what, I'll stipulate that the president should lead more aggressively if you'll stipulate that the Republicans in the Congress have to find a balanced approach that includes revenues. Got a deal?
They actually did that.
They
did that in their
I'm not
vote
talking
on
about
January
then,
1st.
Talking about going
They
forward.
have yielded on the revenue issue, and now it's time for the president to lead on solving the problem of the long-term spending, just as you've said.
Yeah, and that's my point, is that a lot of lawmakers feel the way that Nan does, which is we gave. And whether or not they did or didn't, it's not the point. They said, in my districts, I don't care that my approval rating nationally is 6%. They're going to reelect me in 2 years and in 4 years and whatever. All I got to do is say the party line. And there's enough of them that I think John Boehner, I actually feel bad for the guy. He's in such a box right now. We played 2 sound bites that say it all. Mitch McConnell's not going to lift a finger to help him. He's like, this is your problem. I'm not taking point on this. I saw what happened to you last time. You worked out a deal with the president. You went back, and then your own caucus said, sorry, you might have worked out the deal. You didn't check with me
What
first.
happens when the Senate comes to an agreement on a deal that includes revenues and
He may,
expenditures?
I think, well, you're the better person to ask. I think if McConnell takes the bullet on this and says, I reached the deal with the president, we're going to close some loopholes, but we're going to get some entitlement reform, specifically on Medicare. They'll means test. They'll maybe change the retirement age in an out year or whatever. Can Boehner say, let's go along to get along, or are they going to say, no chance, no way?
Well, if you look at an announcement, I think it was yesterday, H.R. 1, the bill they regard as most important this year is tax reform. So I think there's a lot of common ground that they can reach regarding simplifying the tax
Well, maybe
code.
I'm just believing in unicorns here and rainbows, but is there a chance, Anthony, that everybody's got fatigue over this stupidity that every 3 months we have to go through this, right, and put the actual credit rating of the United States at risk for what? That this idea of a grand bargain is actually possible? Do you think there's enough appetite on both sides? Or I'll argue, as much as I don't like it, this is the Republicans' only leverage they got. And as much as they might tick off the public, this is the only lever that they can have to force the president. And why would they give up that lever? Because they're not winning anyway with public opinion polls, but on policy they might get what they want.
They might get what they want, and Andrew had talked about optics before, and obviously the president is very good at that, and he's good at being the bully pulpit and marketing, and he's winning, I think, the ad campaign here for sequestration. The real issue is that if you look at the polls that the Wall Street Journal came out with, people are not really inclined to support the sequestration. However, they do want deep cuts, and that's not only Republicans, but it's also independent voters, which are going to be very important to the Democrats and the Republicans, for that matter, come 2014. It's going to come down to what are the cuts going to look like? How much is Obama and his administration going to play with it? Are they going to go after, the FAA, make people feel the pain?
And I know I'm really heavy, Elise, I'm sorry. Just got to ask one question because I don't know the answer to this. I get it to a degree, but let's say they hold firm. Nobody breaks ranks and Republicans hold and say, we're not going to give you a penny of revenue, okay? So you can stomp your feet all you want, Mr. President. We'll go into sequestration. What is the end game? What do they hope to accomplish? Because in the end, the president's not going to bring a meat axe to entitlement programs across the board. He's only going to do this, and he's got more leverage, and he can say to the public, I don't want to do this, they're making me. What's the end game for Republicans? I just don't get how they play this thing out much longer and they get anything out of it. Because at the end, this can't help the U.S. economy, right? What's the end game?
The U.S. economy will definitely be helped. I mean, we know people are definitely, Americans are looking for an answer, and they are looking for leadership, and they do know. They know that the federal government takes too much right now of our economy. This is clear. But Republicans are going to, Republicans are going to have to show that they are working across the aisle, that they are taking a balanced and sensible approach, and this is about the right size that works for everyone. It's got to be a common ground approach. It can't just be one side insisting.
I don't think anybody thinks, any economists think that the economy will grow at the same time we're going to make. Now maybe you'll say that's a sacrifice we need to make to bring spending in line, but the economy's not going to grow at the same time. I haven't heard economists say that this is going to bring economic growth to 2-3%.
Well, I think that's
if anything, it goes south. I mean, if you heard Bernanke today, I mean, it wasn't even. I mean, I don't know.
But Richard, one reason that the Federal Reserve has had to do what it's doing in terms of keeping interest rates very low is because they're actually trying to finance all that debt with minimal damage to the economy.
The economy will grow more quickly when we cut federal spending in the short run.
When we right-size the federal government, that frees up the resources for the economy to grow.
There is no evidence of that. Great Britain's in the triple-dip recession. Austerity has failed every time it's been tried. You might have a long-term point about spending, and that's worth debating. But in the short run, The Tea Party policy of cut spending now is economic disaster.
Well, the American people are asking, and again, Andrew's poll results that he just cited show that the American people are asking for leadership on making
But
sure
they're
the federal government
conflicted.
is
This
the right
much we
size.
can't agree on. They're conflicted about what they want. Now, when we come back, we're going to be talking about the math of all this and specifically how the markets will respond to this. How will the sequester impact not only our markets but international ones as well? RFL back after this break. Stay with us.